Welcome everyone to the Montessori Family Life webinar series. We're so glad that you're here today. I'm Lorna McGrath and I'm your host. Welcome back if you are returning. Welcome to the broadcast if you are new. We have with us today not only me, the host, but also Margot Garfield Anderson, who is from the Montessori Foundation and is a team member of ours, and Jonathan Wolf, who is also with the foundation and a team member. Jonathan is an author. He's an international speaker. He is a Montessori adult educator and an educational consultant for schools and families. Jonathan and I have been working together for a long time, and we like to do our broadcasts with Margot and Jonathan and me. But John is going to lead this session today. Margot and I will join in when appropriate, but he will be leading our team as we go through the session. It's called The Inner Work of Parenting. So John, I'm going to leave it up to you. I'll get the PowerPoint up and running.
The inner work of parenting, what we can learn, meaning we parents can learn from children to help us be happier, healthier, and better caregivers. You know, normally as teachers and parents, we think about what we can give to the children. Maria Montessori actually spoke about the inner work of the adult. So we're going to take a look at our inner work responsibilities as parents today. So if you go to the next slide, Lorna. Okay, I'm gonna, because this type is very small here, I'm gonna tell you a couple stories about what I learned from children, both in my house and in my classroom. But this is a wonderful Gary Larson cartoon. I will read you the text. So the large carrot is the mother or father carrot, and she is reading a story to her baby carrots before bedtime, and the cartoon reads, "And then the creatures yanked him out of the ground, skinned him alive, boiled him, and ate him. The end. Now go to sleep."
Oh man, I'd be having nightmares, John.
None of us have ever done anything like that to our children, have we? No.
No.
So in the spirit of what we can learn from children, sort of the opposite of what we can teach children, I want to share a couple stories that were very eye-opening for me as a parent and later as a Montessori teacher. So when my former wife and I, Margaret, were married, I took on her children from her first marriage, who were 8 and 11 years old, Julie and Janie. And Margaret and I decided, for reasons of ethics, integrity, morals, that we would keep our separate apartments until we were married. We didn't feel comfortable with me staying at her place before we were married. That was just our moral decision. But I returned from a business trip one evening and I had this massive fever. And Margaret said to me, "You know, you're not staying in your apartment, you're coming to my place because I need to take care of you." So the next thing I know, I'm in the master bedroom for the first time, and she's got these cold compresses on me. And in comes my oldest stepdaughter, Julie, who's now a very successful professional. She's 11 years old. And I'm lying in her mother's bed for the first time, and I'm feeling a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. So I look at this 11-year-old daughter and I say, "Julie, I'm really, really sick. Do you mind if I sleep in your mom's bed tonight?" And Julie grimaces her face and goes, "It's your life," and walks out of the room. It's like, you know, I kind of felt about this small. And, you know, as I thought about it, the message was, Dad or stepdad, don't put your psychological baggage on me. You know, you want to make a decision to sleep in my mom's bed, that's on you. Don't bring me into this picture. So it was kind of a lesson from this 11-year-old. And it's like, John, deal with your own discomfort, but don't let it spill into my life. The second story, you know, easy for you to laugh, Lauren. It was painful.
Sorry, John.
No, I'm teasing. The second story, in my very first Montessori classroom in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I had a classroom, early childhood classroom, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. I had a little girl. I know Margot and Lauren have heard this story repeatedly, but it was probably the most powerful experience I ever had at the hands of a child in terms of my own inner learning. I had a little girl named Jennifer, in my classroom. She was a 4-year-old girl, but she was really a 40-year-old person in a 4-year-old's body, very mature, very focused child. And this child also knew me outside of class because I was socialized with her parents. I had dinner with them. I played tennis on their tennis court in the suburbs of Philadelphia, occasionally house sat for them. So I came to class one morning in some kind of a really foul mood. I don't know what was bothering me or what was depressing me, but I didn't leave my emotional negativity at the door, leave my baggage at the door, and put on the Montessori game face for these preschool children. So I was walking around looking kind of like death warmed over, just like no joy, no enthusiasm for being with these wonderful angelic children. Halfway through this very sort of flat, down, no emotion, no enthusiasm morning, this 4-year-old girl looks across the classroom, Jennifer, and she summons me. She goes, "Mr. Wolf." You know, I knew just by the look in her face that the universe was going to speak through this child's voice, and it really wasn't going to be very pretty. So I came up to Jennifer, and rather than doing what we normally do as early childhood Montessori teachers, getting down on the child's level, you know, eye level, and going, "Yes, Jennifer, what can I do for you?" I towered over, "Yeah, Jennifer, what's up?" You know, really very supportive behavior because I was in such a foul mood. She puts her hands on her hips and she goes, "Mr. Wolf, you look a little sad this morning. Why don't you lie down and take a nap?" But remember, I was not in a place at that time in my role as a parent and my role as an educator thinking that this process of Montessori teaching was all about Jennifer and changing the world. I didn't think it had anything to do with my development. That wasn't even in my mindset. So I just said, "Fine, Jennifer, go back to your work." 3 minutes later, same child, I get a tug on my sleeve. And I go, "Jennifer, what is it now?" She goes, "You know, Mr. Wolf, if you don't stop this sadness right now, you're not going to play tennis on my tennis court anymore." And I will tell you honestly, I think the word in religious life is epiphany. It was almost like when she said that to me, it was almost like a hand hit me on the side of the head with a voice of saying, "John, you're bringing your emotional negativity into these children's lives, and this child is simply not going to put up with it. Grow up, you know, deal with your unhappiness, leave your baggage at the door, put on the Montessori game face, and be positive with these children." And that was those two examples were the beginning of my understanding that teaching as a Montessori teacher or parenting as a Montessori parent or any parent is not only about the children, it is also a golden opportunity for us to take a look at ourselves and improve ourselves as role models for children.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts, ladies, before we go to the next, any good stories?
Oh, there's so many, there's so many that I experienced during my teaching career and during my time of being a parent with my own 2 children that it's hard to sort them out. I was constantly learning from the children about myself and about, things that I needed to tweak or needed to just be aware of. And they did it in such an innocent, honest way that it never, there's an ouch on this screen, but it never felt particularly like it was an ouch. I never felt affronted, but I would think, oh, okay, man, I better think about that. And not that I always did or changed whatever it was that they thought that I ought to, but I gave it some real serious thought. And if it needed to be changed, then I did it. And if I felt like, well, that's not so bad, then I'd kind of keep it for a while. So yeah, children have a lot to teach us. They have insights that we have lost touch with because we're always trying to sort of find solutions, where children are always so much more in tune with feelings than concrete solutions to things. They just know what you're feeling.
Well, you raised, I think, a really key point, which is children will be very honest with us, but not in an unkind or mean-spirited way. Their variable is, will we listen to them? Or
Right.
will we either ignore them? Well, that's just a child. Or will we take offense and go, well, you're being disrespectful? You know, sometimes
Mhm.
children tell us things that hurt, like Jennifer Cushman told me. And the variable is, will the adult listen to what the child is counseling them to look at in their own character? Margot, anything you want to share here?
I was just going to say that, I think one of the hardest things for humans to do is to be open enough to receive those messages. And so my I don't have a specific tale, but just being aware that sometimes if you just allow yourself to hear what somebody is saying, and absorb it, it really can rotate your whole point of view around a lot.
Yeah, yeah, well
Oh,
said. Well said.
oh.
Okay, Lauren, I think we can go to the next slide, please.
Okay.
This is my favorite of Montessori's quotes on what she called the spiritual preparation of the adult. And as I read you this paragraph, and then we'll dissect it a little bit, I'm going to ask you that every time you see the word teacher, just for the fun of it, replace it with the word parent and see if it also applies. But I'll read it as teacher. The first essential is that the child should go through. Excuse me. The first essential is that the teacher should go through an inner spiritual preparation. Cultivate certain aptitudes in the moral order. This is the most difficult part of her training, without which all the rest is of no avail. She must study how to purify her heart and render it burning with charity towards the child. She must put on humility and, above all, learn how to serve. She must learn how to appreciate and gather in all those tiny and delicate manifestations of the opening life in the child's soul. Ability to do this can only be attained through a genuine effort toward self-perfection. So I'd like to take a little look at this line by line. So she says that the first essential is that the teacher, parent, adult should go through an inner spiritual preparation. And then it's the second sentence really fascinates me. This is the most difficult part of her training as a teacher or parent, without which all the rest is of no avail. So for me, this really bears some consideration, because we tend to think oftentimes as teachers and parents, if I just had the right technique of parenting,
Mhm.
everything would be cool with my child. I'll get my child to do what I want them to do and behave in the way I want them to behave. And teachers, including Montessori teachers, think the same way. It's like, if I just have the right instructional strategies. And what Maria Montessori is saying here is, like, you can learn everything about child development, at least this is my interpretation, or everything about teaching in Montessori or being a Montessori parent, and you might still find the most important part elusive, which is, what kind of energy are you putting out for the child? What does the child see in your consciousness and your character? I once had a really,
Mhm.
I once had a rather silly thought. We use this term in Montessori teaching or in child development called normalization, which is the empowered, fully conscious, fully aware, fully self-empowered child. And Montessori called that normalization. It's really a happy, capable learner. I was thinking one day, maybe on one of these days where I wasn't feeling well again, I'm wondering if a child in my Montessori preschool class ever did this, sort of looked me up and down and went, if that's a definition of normalization as an adult, I think I'll pass. It's like, what are children seeing in us? And Montessori is saying that what they see in our actual behavior is actually as important as anything that we are parenting them in or teaching them in.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go
Well,
ahead.
I was just gonna say that, I have worked with Montessori teachers for a very long time, and I have known some Montessori teachers who were absolutely expert, what I would call technologists. They knew every aspect of the lessons. They presented them perfectly. They expected the children to repeat them, perfectly. It was all about those lessons and those presentations. But there was a feeling in the room of of unrest, of sort of almost a negative feeling in the room. And then I've been in other teachers' classrooms where they weren't that great at presenting the materials. You know, they didn't quite know the whole lesson exactly the way it was in their albums, but they sometimes modified it intentionally for the child because they learned in a different way, or they just were more relaxed about it. You know, and the feeling in the room was very, very different. The feeling in the room was, okay, it's calm, it's safe in here, I feel comfortable. And so it's what you're saying is so true, and it's not just true in a classroom, it is so true in the home as well.
Yeah, it's so much about the energy and emotions children perceive. It's not only about the content we're providing them. So in her next sentence, Montessori writes, she, meaning the parent or teacher, must study how to purify her heart and render it burning with charity towards the child. So, you know, you purify water, you're taking impurities out. So I think we all should ask ourselves, do children in our homes, whom we're parenting, or children in our classrooms if we're teachers, do they see us either consciously or unconsciously expressing or acting out our negativity, our fear, our dislike, our irritation? And there's nothing wrong, of course, with a parent expressing to a child, when I saw this happen, I really felt angry. But that's different than spilling over one's negativity or anger onto a child. So Montessori asks us to actually take a look at what kind of energy do children see coming off of us? Is it positive in language? Is it positive in tone? Or does it come across as negative or punitive or shaming?
Mm-hmm.
And in her next sentence, she says the teacher must put on humility and above all, learn how to serve. And for me, that word humility is, do we really perceive ourselves as people, authority figures, only dispensing information to children so they can be better behaved and be better learners? Or do we also see ourselves as learners about children and learners about ourselves through children? Is our paradigm only authority, or is it also the humility to go, today maybe I'm going to learn something about myself, and I'm going to learn something more about my child because I'm going to have the humility to say, you know, I know how my parents raised me, and I know how, you know, what currently I think should happen here, but let me step back and have the humility to go, what's really going on here with my child? It's what we call observation in Montessori.
Mm-hmm.
And then my favorite of all of Montessori's sentences in this paragraph, the teacher must learn how to appreciate and gather in all those tiny and delicate manifestations of the opening life in the child's soul. It's really a continuation of that process of humility. What so impresses me about this sentence is look at the two verbs she uses. She doesn't say she must gather in all those tiny, that's scientific. She says also appreciate what the child is exhibiting. Do we celebrate our children's little victories, or are we holding them to, you know, sometimes expectations that are too high? I know an awful lot of teachers and parents, because they themselves had parents who were very, very strict or held them to sort of impossibly high standards. Those teachers and parents, because they never heard from their parents, hey, you made some progress today, that's great, or I know you're really making a great effort. They are more focused on telling the child what they didn't do or pointing out how much more they should do than going, hey, I saw an increment of progress in your learning and behavior. So I think that appreciation verb is really, really huge. And I think we all need to look at, are we taking time to appreciate our children's little increments of gain in their academic learning and in their behaviors? And any thoughts on before we go to the next slide, ladies?
Yeah, I just think this is so timely because, you know, we're all in this unusual state of affairs with COVID-19. And so many of us are, for the first time, maybe 24/7 with our children, and they're 24/7 with us. And so sometimes when you're in such close quarters for so much time of the day, you know, the frustrations and the emotions that may not even be about your child can come up for you, but come out onto the child. And I think that these are really important things that Montessori was saying as we think about the time that we're living in right now. When I read that one that says, render it burning with charity towards the child, I think of almost like give the child a break. You know, they're doing their best just like you're doing your best in this sort of crazy situation, and so look for what they are accomplishing, as you said, John, and it may be small. You know, it may be hard to find sometimes, but really look, because I'm sure every day we can find something that we can appreciate about our children, and then let them know that. I think that's just so very important. And what you'll find is sometimes if you do that, one day you'll just be doing something and all of a sudden your child will say to you, you know, Dad, you did such an amazing job on that woodworking project. You worked really hard on it, you know, and you go, oh, okay, yeah.
Right,
So
yeah.
it's really a wonderful thing to model for children.
Well, Lorna, when you were talking about adults monitoring their emotions, the thought occurred to me, if I, as a parent, had asked myself when my daughters did something that I was displeased with, or some behavior that surprised me, or something that they didn't complete in their work, in their studies, or their chores around the house, if I had stopped and asked myself, is this emotion that I'm having about me, or is it really about their behavior? So oftentimes, we get irritated because our children surprise us with their behavior. They're children, and they press our buttons. We superimpose our emotions, and it's really about our emotional reaction. It's not really about what the child did. The child needs to be called and redirected, but the emotion is mine. And that's a real different, we have to separate out those two things.
Yeah. So Margot, anything from you on this one?
I just wanted to add something that my mother used to say to me when I was a young parent of twin children, who, were normally going in two different directions, and you get frayed to your very last nerve at some points in the day, and you want them to just step in line, toe the line, fall in step, everyone. And she would say, don't squash the spirit.
Yeah.
Don't stamp the spirit out of them. Let them be children. There's plenty of time for the other stuff. And I think that that's what Montessori gives children, a bigger opportunity than some other educational models, which still are like the teacher's at the head of the classroom and you'll toe the line and you'll follow the directions, instead of allowing the child to follow their own inner self of what they're looking for. So as parents, when you bring it home, if you can just kind of like dial it down a little bit, everybody will get there.
Right.
Well
That's
put.
right.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next slide. Thanks, Margot. So some of you may know this wonderful book by the Lebanese poet and writer Khalil Gibran. He wrote a book about a fictional human being, man who goes to a village to tend to their spiritual needs, and now he's going back to his own country, and they ask him one more time to share his wisdom. And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us of children." And the prophet said, "Your children are not your children. They come through you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you." It's such a different perspective on parenting. I like to use the analogy when I read this quote. Would you all agree that we want children as a life skill to learn to appreciate different forms of music and to find a way in their own way to express some form of music? Would that be reasonable set of outcomes? We want them to appreciate music of different culture and in any form, be expressive in music. Is there a difference between that overarching outcome? We want children to appreciate and express their inner musical life, and saying, but my parents had me play the piano, and you're going to learn to play the piano. We might all agree that we want children to experience and express music. Does that mean they need to play the same instrument that you and I played when we were asked to play by our parents? That's where it goes off course. And that's why Gibran says you can give them your love, but you can't give them your thoughts, because they have their own thoughts. And I think that's such a hard thing to do as a parent, because we tend to superimpose what our parents did with or to us, or we overcompensate in the other direction. Like, my parents were so strict with me, I'm not going to give my child any rules. It's like, oh my gosh, now we're going in the other direction. So.
Yeah. I remember once when I was, maybe, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, maybe, we were at my aunt and uncle's house, and they had 2 children that they adopted, and we had not met one of them, and so it was our time to go and meet them. And they were quite a bit younger than us. They were maybe 3 and 5 years old, and we'd driven a long ways, and we'd been there a long time, and the kids, the younger ones, were getting tired. It was time for them to go, to bed, to sleep. They were just exhausted from being with their cousins all day and this whole thing. And I remember my uncle saying to these 2 little tiny children, you 2 are going to stay up, and you're not going to go to sleep, and you're going to have fun whether you like it or not. And I always remember him saying that, and I thought that was the silliest thing for him to say to those 2 little kids, because they were practically falling asleep right there, in front of us. But he had it in his mind that they were going to stay up and they were going to have fun with their cousins, whether they liked it or not.
Lorna, there's a school, I don't know if it still exists, but when I administrated schools in Phoenix, there was a chain of private schools called Camelback Desert Schools, and their tagline on their lighted signs at night was, "We make children feel good about themselves." You don't have to go sit over there and feel good about yourself. It's like, we make children feel good about themselves. How people give themselves away with their language,
Really?
They do, obviously, yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next to last slide, and then we'll open this up for people's thoughts and questions and comments. So I have a workshop that I give for Montessori teachers on the spiritual preparation of the teacher that's based on four different perspectives that I've been thinking about for years. So I'd like to sort of turn that toward parenting. 4 commitments of the inner work of parenting. The first one we've talked about. I view the responsibility of parenting as an opportunity for me to become a living example of the kind of human being I want my children to become. So again, it's like, I want to do a little experiment here. I'd like you to recall, and I won't ask for your feedback, but I'll tell you the results when I do this with teachers. Remember, if you can, for a moment, your most favorite teacher you ever had as a child, between preschool through elementary school, not into secondary, because that's very subject specific. Recall your most favorite teacher. And then as soon as you have that person in mind, I'd like you to give some thought to what were the things about that teacher that endeared them to you? Why were they special to you? So when I do this exercise with teachers, we go around the room and I ask them simply, I don't want to hear about the name of your teacher or who they, but I simply want you to tell everybody what they did for you, why you remember them. 9 times out of 10, people talk about how that teacher's personality impacted their character and personality. She was so kind to me. She really helped me believe in myself. She helped me try a little bit harder. Hardly anybody talks about instructional excellence.
Right.
It's an interesting thing. What children remember about their favorite teachers is the personality of the teacher and how it empowered them and made them feel like an incredible human being themselves and a capable person. They actually don't remember subject matter. So the question, does this also apply to parenting? What will our children remember about us? Will it be that, well, my father taught me how to do woodwork? It might be that. but it's probably going to be my father or mother, was really patient with me and taught me patience and perseverance. It's more about the character and the energy again and the emotions than it is about the content of parenting. So that's what really number one is about. Number two, I believe my observed behavior is more powerful than my rules and reminders. Walking my talk has the greatest impact on my children's development. So I do a little exercise in Montessori classrooms where I have teachers remind themselves of the kind of what we call grace and courtesy or social responsibility and social intelligence lessons we teach them, whether it's please, thank you, may I work with you. And then I ask them, do children ever see you after you've given these wonderful grace and courtesy, social intelligence lessons? Do they ever see you doing just the opposite behavior because you're not unconscious of your own behavior? And the classic one that always comes up is that teachers give these beautiful lessons in children, during our work period, we're going to use our inside work voices, our work period voices, so everyone can concentrate. I can concentrate on my lessons. You can concentrate on your work. Let's keep our voices very peaceful and quiet. 10 minutes later, there's a group of disruptive children across the classroom, teachers over here trying to give a lesson, and without thinking, the teacher stands up and goes, there's some people that are not using their inside work voices. The children look at the teacher like, So this one, your invitation on this one is to ask yourself, whatever lessons about behavior or thinking or manners or proper language you give to your child, do they see you as a parent walking your talk? I mean, the classic example in many families is we tell children not to use vulgar or dirty language, but do they often hear adults in frustration use vulgar or, dirty language? It's like, well, what's the bigger lesson? The lesson where we present, please use clean language, or our actual behavior? And that's what really number two is about. Is there a discrepancy between what we're asking our children to, how we want our children to live, and our actual behavior?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Number three, I believe that mistakes and conflicts, my own and my children's, are opportunities for self-improvement. They are not bad or to be feared. So again, I would ask yourself, when your child does something that is disrespectful, irresponsible, surprisingly strange, which children will do, after we take a deep breath, is the first thing that comes out of our mouth, anger, where we're just spewing our anger on the child? Or is it shaming language? Is it, I'm so disappointed in you. I thought you were smarter than that, Margot. Or is our mindset, is our paradigm of discipline, okay, you made a mistake. What can you learn from this? What can we learn from this if we made a mistake together, parent and child? Is your parenting based on learning, or is it based on punishment and shame? Okay, that's something to think about. And then very lastly, I am committed to monitoring and managing my emotions and personal energy capital before helping my children manage their own. I know of some parents, and I know Lorna and Margot have heard of these parents too, they don't put their children in timeout when the child has misbehaved. If the adult is having a visceral emotional reaction, the adult puts themselves in timeout. They say, I'm going to go in my room and make myself calmer and more peaceful, and then we will talk about this respectfully. So it is really our responsibility, if we want to be good role models of stress management and emotional management, for children to see us managing our energy in self-aware and positive ways. And then from that place of calmness and self-regulation, our own self-regulation, we can now help the child calm down and evaluate their perhaps misbehavior. Margot, Lorna, any thoughts on this one?
Well, I think on that last one that you just did, John, it's about, demonstrating by our own actions how to do what we want the children to do. So if I'm self-regulating my own emotions and I take myself away from the situation when I'm upset, and I say to my child, I need to go and take a break for a minute or two, and then we can talk, then they are looking at me, they're hearing me, they're learning from the way that I behave, not just okay, you need to calm down, relax, calm down. Well, if I'm not relaxed and calm down, then I'm not going to teach them the same thing. So it's about us, again, modeling the behaviors that we want to see from them.
Well, and I also love the fact that you used an iMessage statement there with your hypothetical child. I'm going to calm myself down, then we will talk.
Yeah.
Notice it's I'm going to take care of my own needs. It's not, you've made me so angry, I've got to calm myself down. It's not an accusatory, judgmental statement about the child. It's like, I need to make myself calm, and then we will talk. We want to teach children in Montessori to take responsibility for their own thoughts, emotions, and actions. And the only way we can teach them that is we actually model that sense of, this is what I need to do for myself to be a respectful, responsible, loving, caring, compassionate person, and then we will talk. It's not about the child's behavior first. It's about, where am I at? What's going on with me? Margot, any thoughts on this one?
Well, to me personally, this last one actually sets up success for the other three.
Well put.
Yeah, you're right.
It really does. Well, and if we look at brain development, to be very, very simplistic, and many of you know this, the brain is comprised of the reptilian brain, which goes the oldest part of the brain, which is sort of the fight or flight brain. Then there's the limbic or midbrain, which is the sort of the repository of processing emotions. And then there's the frontal lobes and the big neocortex, the new brain, which is the really higher order thinking brain. If you look at those three brains as computers or microprocessors, the reptilian and the limbic brains, the fight flight brain and the emotional brain, are faster computers than the cognitive computer. So when we allow our emotions, our negative emotions, our angry emotions, our shaming emotions to take over, we're really not in a place of helping ourselves or our child activate the neocortex, the thinking brain, the frontal lobes, because we're caught in the emotional brain. So calming the emotional brain, the limbic or the midbrain down, I've got to calm myself down, calm my body down, actually is foundational to the thinking brain being activated. It's like if your limbic system is like this because you're upset, you're not in a mode, and your child will never be in a mode because their brain is probably doing the same thing as the parent to learn something new. So really well taken point, Margot.
Okay. We are running close to the end here.
Then we will open this up here. I know I've gone a little bit long here. So one last quote from the prophet. You are the bows and arrows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hands be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Any questions come in or thoughts?
Let me just stop sharing my screen if I can find out how. Not there. Let's see if I can go here. Doesn't want me to, but I'm going to. I'm going to make this happen.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going to stop showing screen.
Got it. You got it.
Did I?
Yep.
Okay, good. Let's see what we have, if we have anything. Oh my goodness, we do. Okay, we've got a few. One says, please guide again how to download the PowerPoint. Oh, well, okay. Go to the handout section of your control panel if you haven't already, and click on that little arrow, and you will see it'll drop down, and you'll see there's not a PowerPoint presentation, there's a PDF. So just click on that PDF and then download it on your computer and you'll have it. All right, let's see. And let's see. Ooh, this is a sort of a long one. I knew that one of my students had really been listening to Montessori language when she asked a little boy to choose work with her. When he didn't come over quickly enough, she walked up to him and said, if you don't come over right now, you will choose the opportunity to choose to work with me. I wonder where she heard that. Oh, that's a good one. Thank you, Elizabeth.
However, it does bring up in one quick thing. I think if I were to pick one word in the English language that I would want children of all ages to hear, it's the word choose. Oh, I see you have chosen to do this. Is there another choice? How many adults do we know who walk around playing the victim? My boss made me do this. The IRS made me do this. Whatever. It's like letting children know, I see you have chosen to do this. Is there another choice you could make that would be better? That word choice is so key for the development of their character.
It is. It's a great word. Well, John, Margot, we have used up our time. I hope everyone has enjoyed today's presentation. I know that I have. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next week.